When a routine traffic stop becomes a career-defining moment, what starts as a simple stop quickly escalates into something unexpected. A police officer's gut feeling collides with a truth he never saw coming, because the man he pulls over may just hold his future. The sun was beginning to set over the quiet streets of Hawthorne, casting the sky in warm streaks of amber and gold. Michael Reed was driving home after a long, demanding day at work. His sedan rolled smoothly down the road, the gentle hum of the engine blending with the soft sound of the radio, a calm escape from the city's pace. He reached for the air conditioning, trying to ease the stress lingering from the office. Approaching a yellow light, Michael slowed down, coming to a full stop just as it turned red. That's when the flashing red and blue lights burst into view behind him, followed by the piercing wail of a siren. Michael checked his rearview mirror, his brow tightening. He pulled to the side of the road and rolled down his window as a police car came to a stop behind him. Out stepped Officer Daniel Brooks, mid-30s, buzz cut, badge glinting on his chest. He adjusted his belt and walked toward the vehicle, with the calm authority of someone used to being in control. "License and registration," Brooks said, his voice flat but firm. Michael complied without question, reaching into the glove box and passing over the documents with measured ease. Though his expression remained neutral, he could feel the officer's eyes locked on him, analyzing, judging, almost searching for something. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Brooks asked, leaning closer to the open window. "I'm not exactly sure," Michael replied, voice calm and respectful. "You didn't come to a full stop at the light," Brooks said. Though there was a slight hesitation in his tone, Michael frowned subtly but gave a small nod. "I thought I had slowed enough, but I understand." Brooks paused, his eyes narrowing, lingering by the window just a moment too long. This wasn't just about a traffic violation anymore, at least not for him. He glanced down at the license again. "You're not from around here, are you?" Michael hesitated briefly. "I moved here recently. The address is on the license." But Brooks wasn't really focused on the answer. His line of questioning began to shift, no longer routine, but edged with something else. He leaned in a bit more, as if trying to read Michael's thoughts. "Where were you headed in such a hurry?" "Just going home," Michael answered, still steady, though the tension in the air had clearly changed. Brooks wasn't seeing just another driver anymore. He saw something that made him wary. Michael could sense the shift, but he remained composed. What Brooks took for nervousness was really control. And this moment? It was just the beginning. The officer stepped back, folding Michael's documents with slow, deliberate motions before tucking them into his chest pocket. He straightened, his expression tilting into something smug, as if he'd already made a judgment. "Step out of the car," Brooks ordered. Michael's grip on the wheel tightened for a moment, but his face showed nothing. "Is there a specific reason for that, officer?" he asked, tone even, gaze steady. The shift in power. Brooks's lips twitched, but he quickly masked it. "I asked you to step out of the vehicle," he repeated. "You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." The threat wasn't explicit, but it hung heavy, in the air, clear and undeniable. Michael exhaled slowly, then opened the door. As he stepped out, Brooks's eyes swept over him, assessing. Michael stood slightly taller, with broad shoulders, yet nothing about him seemed aggressive. His tailored suit hinted at professionalism. His polished shoes suggested attention to detail, someone orderly, composed. But none of it seemed to register. Brooks pointed to the front of the car. "Hands where I can see them." Michael complied, his movements deliberate and calm. "Is there something specific you're looking for?" he asked. Brooks gave a faint smirk. "Just routine. We've had some incidents around here. Can't be too careful." Michael turned his head slightly, eyes locking with the officers. "Incidents involving men in suits, driving sedans? Or is this really about something else?" The question hit like a jab. Brooks's composure wavered, just for a second. He straightened, his hand drifting toward his belt, more instinct than necessity. "Watch your tone," he said sharply. "I'm simply asking a question," Michael replied, his voice calm, firm, but never defiant. That steadiness seemed to rattle Brooks more than any resistance would have. The officer leaned in, eyes narrowing. "You seem awfully familiar with how this goes. You got something to hide?" Michael let the silence hang for a beat. Then, coolly, "No, officer. I just believe in clarity, especially in situations like this. Transparency, you know." Brooks scoffed, offering no reply. He stepped back, circling slowly in front of the car. The dynamic between them had shifted, and he could feel it, even if he didn't quite understand it. Michael wasn't flustered. No trembling hands, no stammering words, no anxious glances. Just composure, poise, a quiet control that unsettled Brooks more than any outburst would have. "You seem pretty confident," Brooks muttered, almost to himself. "Like you think you know how this ends." Michael didn't rise to it. Instead, he tilted his head slightly. "Confidence isn't the point here, officer. Respect is." Brooks froze, a half-second pause before turning back to face him. The smirk had vanished, replaced with something tighter, almost defensive. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Michael's calm presence was throwing him off balance, and he didn't like it. As the silence stretched between them, the tension grew electric. Brooks was starting to realize this wasn't going to follow the usual script. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. The real test was about to begin. His fingers tapped against the holster at his side, frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by someone like Michael. His eyes flicked toward the sedan, as if hoping to spot a reason, any reason, that would justify what he was about to do. "Turn around. Place your hands on the hood," he ordered, voice clipped. "I need to check for weapons." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Weapons?" he echoed, incredulous, but still steady. "Do I look like someone who's carrying a weapon?" Brooks's jaw tightened, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. "I'm not going to ask again." Michael paused, just long enough for something unreadable to flash across his face. Then, without a word, he turned and placed his hands flat on the hood. Brooks approached. The sound of his boots crunching against the asphalt broke the uneasy silence. He began the pat-down, quick, mechanical, charged with tension. The truth comes to light Brooks' hands moved roughly, lingering longer than necessary. This wasn't just a search, it was a message, an attempt to assert control, to push buttons. But Michael didn't react. He didn't flinch, didn't tense, didn't even shift under the invasive contact. "You're clean," Brooks muttered, stepping back. The words sounded reluctant, like he was annoyed he hadn't found something, anything, to justify his suspicion. Michael turned around, his face calm, eyes steady. "Of course I am," he said simply. "Now, officer, if you're finished—" "I'm not done," Brooks snapped, his voice rising just enough to betray the strain beneath it. The words came out too fast, too defensive. "You seem to know a lot about what I can and can't do," he continued. "Care to explain why?" Michael folded his arms, his body relaxed despite the heat between them. "I've had more than a few encounters with law enforcement," he said evenly. "Let's just say I've learned a few things over the years." Brooks's eyes narrowed. "That's so? You a lawyer or something?" Michael offered a faint smile. "Or something." That ambiguity rubbed Brooks the wrong way. He stepped closer, invading Michael's space, his voice low and sharp. "You think you're smarter than me? Think you can out-talk your way out of cool and composed.
Head of Internal Affairs, Hawthorne Division. Brooks froze. His eyes flicked to the badge, then back to Michael's face, searching for a sign, some hint it was a bluff. But there was no joke, no grin, only calm authority, and a trace of quiet disappointment.
Reckoning Internal Affairs? Brooks repeated, his voice cracking ever so slightly. Yes, Michael cut in, sparing him the effort of finishing the sentence. I oversee officer conduct. My job is to ensure that those who wear this badge live up to the integrity and values it stands for. Brooks's face drained of color. The confidence he wore like armor began to crumble right in front of him. He took a step back, his hand dropping from his belt, as if the weight of the badge he wore had suddenly become too heavy. Michael stepped forward, reclaiming the space Brooks had unconsciously yielded. Do you know what the most troubling part of this encounter has been, Officer Brooks? His voice was even, but it sliced through the air like a blade. Brooks didn't reply. He looked like a man who had stumbled into quicksand and only now realized he was sinking. It's not the profiling, Michael continued, though that alone is disturbing. It's not the unnecessary escalation either. It's that you did all of this without even knowing who you were speaking to. He let that sink in for a moment. You assumed I didn't know my rights, that I wouldn't understand the laws you're sworn to uphold. And why? Brooks opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Michael's eyes didn't waver. He answered his own question, his voice firm, because I didn't fit your idea of someone worthy of respect. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His words hit like a verdict, quiet, heavy, irrefutable. And that's not just a problem for me, officer, he added. That's a problem for everyone you deal with in that uniform. Brooks's shoulders slumped, the weight of the truth settling in. His eyes drifted back to Michael's badge, as if hoping it might disappear if he looked away long enough. Michael stepped back, giving him space, but his tone remained sharp. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to take a step back, return my documents, and choose your next words very carefully. Brooks opened his mouth, caught between impulse and damage control. But the pause was too long, too revealing. Then Michael added, voice lowering with quiet finality, you'll be hearing from me again. Not as a driver on the side of the road, but as the man who decides whether you're still fit to wear that badge. Brooks swallowed hard. His face flushed red, the moment pressing in on him from all sides. He reached into his chest pocket and pulled out the license and registration, his hands trembling as he handed them over. Michael took them without a word, slipping them back into his wallet. He walked toward the driver's side, one hand resting on the door handle. Then he paused, glancing back over his shoulder. Remember this, Officer Brooks, he said. The badge doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you accountable to everyone. With that, Michael slid into his car and started the engine. Brooks remained frozen in the fading light, confidence shattered, future uncertain. But for Michael, this was far from over. His next move would send ripples through the department. The drive home was silent, but his mind wasn't. The scene replayed in his head, not because it was rare, but because it wasn't. Brooks wasn't the first officer like this he'd faced, and he knew. He wouldn't be the last. But this time, it was different. This time, Michael had the power to act. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the blinds of his office, Michael was already at his desk. Catalyst for change, at the Hawthorne Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, a file lay open on Michael Reed's desk. Officer Daniel Brooks. The record wasn't spotless. Minor complaints of unprofessional behavior, excessive stops, and vague misunderstandings. Nothing serious enough to trigger disciplinary action. Nothing that had ever been properly addressed. Michael leaned back in his chair, fingertips pressed together, eyes fixed on the pages in front of him. Brooks wasn't an outlier. He was a reflection of a much larger issue. And Michael had no interest, in patching bullet wounds with bandages. A knock at the door broke his train of thought. His assistant, Linda, stepped in holding a stack of documents. "Morning, Mr. Reed. I've got the summary on last month's misconduct cases." "Also, Chief, Rollins asked me to remind you about next week's department review." Michael nodded, taking the files from her hands. "Thanks, Linda. And could you schedule a meeting with the chief for this afternoon? There's something I need to discuss." Linda paused, picking up on the seriousness in his tone. "Of course," she said, before quietly exiting the room. Michael turned back to Brooks's file. But his thoughts weren't limited to one officer. This wasn't just about Daniel Brooks. It was about the culture that allowed someone like him to feel justified in his behavior. And if there was one thing Michael knew with absolute certainty, culture started at the top. That afternoon, Michael sat across from Chief Rollins in a stark, glass-walled conference room. Rollins, a seasoned department head with silver-streaked hair and a reputation for directness, listened in silence as Michael recounted the roadside encounter. "I could have dismissed it as just another bad interaction," Michael said, his voice calm but unwavering. "But that would have been a mistake. Brooks's behavior isn't an isolated event. It's a symptom of how far we still have to go." Rollins exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "This isn't the first time his name's come up," he admitted. "But we've always handled it quietly, internally." "And that's the problem," Michael replied. "Quiet doesn't solve anything. It just allows it to happen again." He paused. "It's time we got loud." Rollins looked at him, the weight of the moment settling between them. "And what are you proposing?" "A department-wide review," Michael said without hesitation. "Not just officers, but our training systems, our accountability protocols, our internal culture. If we keep sweeping this under the rug, we're complicit. And if we're not willing to hold ourselves to a higher standard, how can we ask the community to trust us?" Rollins leaned forward, hands clasped. "You're going to ruffle some feathers with this." "Good," Michael said plainly. "It's about time someone did." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Meetings, interviews, internal audits, community forums. Michael worked around the clock, gathering data, speaking with staff, and listening to residents who had long felt unheard. The incident with Officer Brooks became a turning point, not just a case, a catalyst. Brooks, for his part, faced an internal hearing. Michael made no effort to stay in the background. He sat directly across from the officer during the proceedings, watching as Brooks squirmed beneath the scrutiny he had once so freely inflicted on others. The result was a formal suspension. But Michael knew that wasn't the true win. The real victory was making sure there wouldn't be another Brooks. Months later, Michael stood at a podium during a community event, facing a room filled with officers, city leaders, and Hawthorne residents. A new chapter begins. Michael didn't speak of blame. He spoke of responsibility, of the shared duty to build a system that works for everyone. His words weren't just a call for accountability. They were a promise, a vision for something better. "Justice isn't just about catching the bad guys," Michael said, his voice carrying through the hall. "It's about ensuring that those sworn to protect and serve do so with integrity, with fairness, and with respect for every single person they encounter." He paused for a moment, then added, "That's the badge I believe in, and that's the badge we're building here, together." The applause was immediate and thunderous, but Michael didn't bask in it. For him, this moment wasn't a conclusion. It was the beginning of something more meaningful. As he stepped down from the podium, he scanned the crowd. Faces filled the room, some skeptical, some hopeful, all engaged. He knew this transformation wouldn't happen overnight. Real change takes time, persistence, and courage. But it would come, and for now, that was enough.